My name is Adam Warren. I'm 38 years old, a teacher by profession, and a man who has always believed in the sanctity of trust. My wife Rebecca and I have been married for 11 years. In those years, we built a life together that I thought was stable, grounded in mutual respect and love. But as I learned not long ago, even the most solid foundations can hide cracks beneath the surface. It started with small changes, subtle enough to ignore. Rebecca had recently begun going out more often in the evenings. At first, it was a book club she joined with some colleagues. Then it was yoga classes, followed by an occasional night out with a new group of friends she'd met at a local charity event. I didn't think much of it. Rebecca was sociable, and I trusted her implicitly. One Thursday evening, she came home later than usual. I was sitting in the living room, grading papers, when I heard her car pull into the driveway. The clock on the wall read 11:17 p.m. She entered quietly as if trying not to disturb me, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. "Late night?" I asked casually, glancing up from my work. She hesitated before answering, brushing a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Yeah, the yoga class ran longer than expected. We got caught up talking afterward." Her smile was easy, but there was something in her eyes that seemed guarded. I pushed the thought aside. Everyone deserves a bit of privacy, I told myself. Relationships are built on trust, after all. But that trust began to erode over the next few weeks. Rebecca's outings became more frequent, her explanations vaguer. On several occasions, she claimed to be attending events or classes that didn't align with the timestamps on her social media posts or text messages. Once, when she left her phone on the kitchen counter, I noticed a notification pop up from an unfamiliar app called The Circle. It was a simple notification. "Your RSVP for tonight's gathering has been confirmed." Curiosity flared, but I didn't say anything. Rebecca wasn't the type to join secretive groups or clubs, or so I thought. I brushed it off as a social app or perhaps a scheduling tool for her new activities, but the seed of doubt had been planted. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. Rebecca had left for another one of her yoga classes, and I found myself staring at the empty house, my mind spinning. I remembered The Circle and decided to do a bit of research. A quick search online yielded almost nothing. No official website, no app store listing, nothing that explained what it was. The lack of information only fueled my suspicion. A week later, I stumbled onto something by pure accident. Rebecca had left a notebook on the coffee table, and as I went to move it, a slip of paper fell out. On it was a neatly written address and a date, this Thursday. There was no context, no explanation, just a location in a part of town we rarely visited. I debated whether to ask her about it, but something held me back. I wanted to trust her, to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the pieces didn't fit. And so, when Thursday came, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I followed her. I left work early that evening, feigning a headache so I could get home and prepare. At 7 p.m., Rebecca kissed me goodbye, dressed in her usual workout attire, and drove off. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out after her. The address she'd written down led to an upscale but unassuming building on the edge of downtown, its windows tinted and its entrance discreet. I parked across the street, keeping my distance as I watched her get out of the car and approach the door. She glanced around briefly before entering, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. What was this place? A yoga studio? A co-working space? It didn't look like either. My curiosity burned as I debated whether to go inside or wait. Before I could decide, another car pulled up, and a man in his late 40s stepped out. He was impeccably dressed, exuding an air of wealth and confidence. He walked to the door, knocked twice, and was let in without hesitation. I waited for a while, observing. More people arrived, each one entering with an air of purpose. Some were dressed casually, others more formally, but there was a consistency in their behavior. They all seemed careful, cautious, as if they didn't want to be seen. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of the car and crossed the street, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the door, I noticed a small brass plaque beside it that read, "Members only. Welcome to the Circle." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. I had no idea what I was walking into, but something inside me needed to know. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me, and I was immediately enveloped in a hushed, almost reverent atmosphere. The hallway was dimly lit, its walls lined with abstract art and sleek furnishings. Soft ambient music played faintly in the background, accompanied by the low murmur of voices from somewhere ahead. I paused, trying to make sense of my surroundings. This was no yoga studio. The decor was too refined, the air too charged with something I couldn't quite place. Exclusivity, perhaps. A woman in a tailored black suit appeared from a side door and smiled politely as she approached. "Good evening," she said, her tone calm and professional. "May I help you?" For a moment, panic gripped me. What was I supposed to say? My mind raced as I tried to come up with a plausible explanation. I, I think I might be in the wrong place," I stammered. "I'm looking for someone." Her smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Are you a member?" I hesitated. "No, but my wife, Rebecca Warren, she's here. I was supposed to meet her." The woman's expression softened, and she nodded. "Of course. Please follow me." She turned and began walking down the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. I followed, my heart pounding with each step. The further we went, the louder the murmur of voices became. Finally, she stopped in front of a set of double doors and gestured for me to enter. "Enjoy your evening," she said, her voice tinged with a knowing smile. I pushed the doors open and stepped into a large, elegant lounge. The room was filled with people, all of them engaged in quiet conversation. The decor was sleek and modern, with low couches, polished tables, and dim lighting that cast a warm glow over everything. A bar stood at one end of the room, where a bartender in a crisp white shirt was mixing drinks with practiced ease. I scanned the room, searching for Rebecca. My heart clenched when I spotted her near the back, standing with a small group of people. She was laughing at something one of them had said, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't look like someone attending a yoga class. She looked radiant, confident, and completely at ease. I ducked behind a column, my mind reeling. What was this place? Who were these people? And why had Rebecca lied about where she was going? I stayed hidden, watching as she moved through the room, chatting with different groups of people. It was clear she knew many of them well. Too well, in fact. There was an intimacy in her interactions, a familiarity that unsettled me. At one point, a man leaned in close to whisper something in her ear, and she laughed softly, her hand resting briefly on his arm. I clenched my fist, struggling to contain the anger and betrayal bubbling inside me. This wasn't a book club or a yoga class. This was something else entirely. But what? A server passed by with a tray of champagne glasses, and I seized the opportunity to blend in. Taking a glass, I moved further into the room, keeping my distance but staying close enough to observe. Snippets of conversation floated past me, words like discretion, arrangements, and mutual understanding, catching my attention. It wasn't until I overheard a woman at the bar that the pieces began to fall into place. She was talking to a man beside her voice low but clear. So refreshing to have a space where we can all be honest about our relationships. No judgment, no pretense. The man nodded, swirling his drink. "Exactly. My wife and I have been members for years. It's been a game changer for us." A chill ran down my spine as their words sank in. I looked around the room again, this time with fresh eyes. The intimate gestures, the quiet conversations, the careful, deliberate way everyone interacted. It all pointed to one thing. This was a club for people in extramarital relationships. My stomach turned as the realization hit me. Rebecca wasn't here for networking or personal growth. She was here because she had chosen to be part of this secret world, a world built on lies and betrayals. And I had just stumbled into it. I moved to the edge of the room, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Leave and pretend I hadn't seen anything? My hands trembled as I set the champagne glass on a nearby table, trying to steady myself. Before I could decide, a voice broke through my thoughts. "Adam?" I froze, my blood running cold. Slowly, I turned to see Rebecca standing a few feet away, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us locked in a silent standoff. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. Her face paled and she glanced around nervously, as if worried someone might overhear. "We can't talk here," she said quickly. "Come with me." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed my arm and led me toward a side door. My pulse pounded in my ears as we stepped into a small empty meeting room. She closed the door behind us, her hands trembling as she turned to face me. "Adam," she began, her voice shaking. "I can explain." I crossed my arms, my jaw tightening. "I'm listening." Rebecca stood in front of me, her back against the closed door, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. The confidence and ease I had seen on her face earlier were gone, replaced by a look of sheer panic. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. "Explain," I said, my voice low and firm. "Now." She took a shaky breath, her gaze darting to the floor before meeting mine. "It's not what you think," she started, her voice trembling. "I mean, it is, but it's not like I'm having an affair." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the small room. "Not an affair? Rebecca, I just walked into what looks like a damn convention for cheaters, and you're acting like this is normal. What the hell is going on?" Her shoulders slumped, and she ran a hand through her hair, visibly struggling to find the right words. "It's, complicated," she said finally. "Try me," I snapped. She hesitated, then took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for what she was about to say. "This is a private group, the Circle. It's for people who explore unconventional relationships." "Unconventional," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "You mean people who cheat on their spouses?" "It's not like that," she said quickly. "At least not for everyone. It's a space where people can be honest about their desires, where they can talk openly without judgment. For some, yes, it's about extramarital relationships, but for others, it's about freedom." "Freedom?" I said, my voice rising. "You're telling me this is about freedom, while you've been sneaking out and lying to me for weeks?" "I wasn't lying," she said, but the guilt in her eyes betrayed her. "Not completely." "Not completely?" I scoffed, taking a step closer. "Rebecca, you told me you were going to yoga classes. You told me you were with friends. Were those lies, or do you just have a very flexible definition of the truth?" She flinched, and for a moment, she looked as though she might cry. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said softly. "I didn't know how to explain it without you thinking the worst." "Well, congratulations," I said, throwing my hands in the air. "You've succeeded in making me think the worst." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held my gaze. "I didn't come here to cheat on you, Adam, I swear. I joined because I was curious. I felt stuck, like I wasn't allowed to even think about what I wanted. This place, it's not just about affairs. It's about being honest with yourself, with others." "Honest?" I barked. "The only honesty I've seen is the fact that you've been living a double life. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I just supposed to stay in the dark while you explored?" She didn't answer immediately, and her silence cut deeper than any words could. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, mission accomplished," I said coldly. We stood there in silence, the weight of her confession hanging between us. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but part of me was afraid of what I might hear. Instead, I forced myself to focus on the facts. "How long have you been coming here?" I asked. "A few months," she admitted. "It started after I met someone at that charity event, the one I told you about. They introduced me to the Circle, and I wanted to see what it was about." "And this someone," I said, narrowing my eyes, "was it him? The guy you were laughing with earlier?" Her face flushed, and she shook her head. "That's just a friend I've made here." "A friend," I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do all your friends meet you in secret lounges and whisper in your ear?" "It's not like that," she insisted. "Adam, please. I haven't crossed any lines. I haven't done anything physical with anyone." I swear I wanted to believe her, but the trust between us felt cracked, fragile. "So, what do you do here exactly?" "Sit around and talk about your feelings while drinking expensive wine." "It's not just talking," she said, her voice defensive. There are workshops, discussions, ways to explore what you want, what you need. And no, I haven't acted on anything, but yes, I've thought about it. The admission hit me like a punch to the gut. You've thought about it, I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. You've thought about being with someone else. She looked away, her silence more damning than any confession. I took a step back, running a hand through my hair as my mind raced. Do you even want to be married anymore, Rebecca? Or am I just holding you back from all this freedom you're chasing? She stepped forward, her hands outstretched as if to touch me, but I pulled away. Adam, please. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Then why didn't you talk to me? I demanded. Why didn't you tell me you were feeling this way before you ran off to join some secret club? Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I didn't know how, she whispered. I was scared. Scared you'd hate me. Scared you wouldn't understand. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You were right about one thing. I don't understand. The room fell silent again, the tension between us unbearable. Finally, I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. Adam, she said, her voice cracking, please don't leave. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I don't even know who you are anymore, Rebecca. Without looking back, I opened the door and walked out, leaving her standing alone in the room. The drive home was a blur. The city lights streamed past my car windows, but I barely noticed them. My mind was a storm of questions and emotions, all crashing into one another. How had I not seen the signs? Rebecca had been slipping away from me for months, and I had been too blind or too trusting to notice. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the house felt like a stranger's. The warm glow of the porch light that once welcomed me now seemed cold and uninviting. I sat in the car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, unsure if I even wanted to go inside. When I finally stepped through the door, the silence hit me. Rebecca wasn't home yet, which made sense. She would have needed time to compose herself. Or maybe she was still at that exclusive lounge, wrapped in the world she had chosen over our marriage. The thought made my stomach churn. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a whiskey, and sat at the dining table. The glass felt heavy in my hand, just like the weight in my chest. I stared at the wedding photo hanging on the wall, Rebecca and I standing together under a canopy of flowers, her smile radiant, mine full of hope. That version of us felt like a lifetime ago. I didn't know how long I sat there before I heard the faint sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My heart clenched as the front door opened and Rebecca stepped inside. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Adam, she said softly, her voice trembling. Can we talk? I didn't respond immediately, taking a slow sip of my drink instead. She took a hesitant step forward, then stopped when she saw the look on my face. Talk? I said finally, my voice laced with bitterness. I think we did plenty of that already. She sank into the chair across from me, her hands folded tightly on the table. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence between us suffocating. I don't even know where to start, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How about with the truth? I snapped. All of it. No more vague explanations. No more excuses. Just tell me the truth, Rebecca. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. You're right. You deserve that. For the next hour, she poured out everything. How she had felt trapped, not by me, but by the monotony of our life together. How she had started to wonder if there was more out there, something that could make her feel alive again. How a chance encounter at the charity event had led her to the circle, a place where people could explore desires they couldn't admit to in the open. It wasn't about you, Adam, she said, her voice cracking. It wasn't about us. It was about me. I felt like I was losing myself, like I wasn't allowed to want anything outside of what we already had. Her words stung, but they also left me confused. So what? You joined a club for cheaters because you felt bored? It wasn't like that, she said quickly. At least not for me. I swear I haven't done anything physical with anyone. I went there to talk, to figure out what I was feeling, to understand myself. Did you think about me at all? I asked, my voice rising. Did you stop for 1 second to consider how this would make me feel? Or was this just about you the entire time? Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't affect us. But it has, I said, my voice hard. It's affected everything, Rebecca. I don't know how to look at you and not see the lies. I don't know how to trust you after this. She flinched, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fix this. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. I don't think you can. Her sobs grew louder, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the lounge, the people, the lies she had told me to hide her secret. The pity dissolved, replaced by anger and hurt. I need time, I said finally, standing up. I can't deal with this right now. Adam, please, she pleaded, standing too. Don't walk away. Let's figure this out. Together. I shook my head, grabbing my coat from the back of the chair. I need space, Rebecca. I need to think. Without waiting for her response, I walked out the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it felt good, like I could finally breathe. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring as I tried to make sense of everything. What was I supposed to do? Could I forgive her for this? Could I trust her again, knowing she had willingly entered a world that thrived on secrecy and betrayal? The answers felt distant, impossible to grasp. As the hours passed, I found myself parked in a quiet overlook on the edge of town. The city stretched out below me, a sea of lights twinkling in the darkness. I sat there, staring at the view, as the weight of the situation settled over me. One thing was clear: our marriage would never be the same. Whether it ended here or survived this, the trust we had once shared was shattered. And no matter what Rebecca said or how much she apologized, the scars of her choices would remain. I sat in my car at the overlook until the first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon. The stillness of the night had given way to the hum of a waking city, but inside me there was no peace. My thoughts spun in circles, each one darker and more despairing than the last. Rebecca's words played over and over in my mind. It wasn't about you. How could it not be about me? I was her husband, the person she had promised to share her life with. The idea that she had sought something outside of our marriage, something secret, something she hadn't thought I deserved to know, cut deeper than I could express. When I finally drove home, the house was quiet. Rebecca's car was still in the driveway, but the lights were off, and I assumed she had gone to bed. Part of me wanted to walk inside and demand answers to the questions still swirling in my head. Another part of me wanted to avoid her entirely. I ended up crashing on the couch, exhaustion finally pulling me under. When I woke, the sun was high in the sky, and Rebecca was sitting in the armchair across from me, clutching a mug of coffee. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red, and the faint streaks of makeup on her face told me she hadn't slept much either. Hey, she said softly when she saw me stir. I sat up slowly, my body stiff from sleeping in an awkward position. Hey. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the previous night's confrontation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Rebecca broke the silence. I called out of work today, she said. I couldn't focus. I nodded but said nothing. Adam, I know you need time, she continued, but I need to know where we stand. Are you? Her voice faltered, and she took a deep breath before continuing. Are you thinking about leaving? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't let myself think that far ahead yet. The idea of leaving, of walking away from the life we had built together, felt both impossible and inevitable. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I don't even know how to feel. Part of me wants to believe you, to trust that nothing physical happened. But another part of me can't get past the fact that you hid this from me. You lied, Rebecca. For months, her shoulders slumped, and she nodded, tears welling in her eyes again. I know, and I hate myself for it. I should have come to you. I should have talked to you instead of running away. Why didn't you, I asked, my voice raw. Why didn't you feel like you could talk to me? She hesitated, staring down at her coffee as if searching for answers in its dark surface. Because I was scared, she admitted. Scared that if I told you how I was feeling, you'd think I didn't love you anymore. That you'd think I was unhappy with us. Were you unhappy? I asked, my chest tightening. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. No, she said firmly. But I felt restless. Like I wasn't allowed to have thoughts or desires outside of what we already had. And instead of facing that, I hid from it. I convinced myself that the circle was a safe way to explore those feelings without hurting you. I see now how wrong I was. Her honesty, while painful, felt genuine, but it wasn't enough to erase the damage that had been done. "Do you even want to stay married?" I asked bluntly. Her eyes widened, and she leaned forward, setting her coffee on the table. "Of course I do," she said earnestly. "Adam, I love you. I want to fix this, to rebuild what we've lost. But I know that's not just up to me. It's up to you too." Her words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Could I forgive her? Could I trust her again? Or was the betrayal too deep to overcome? "I don't have an answer for you right now," I said finally. "I need time. And if we're going to have any chance at fixing this, we need to be honest with each other. Completely honest." She nodded quickly, her expression earnest. "I'll tell you anything you want to know. No more lies. I promise. I'm serious, Rebecca," I said, my tone firm. "This isn't going to work if you're still hiding things from me." "I know," she said softly, "and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The sincerity in her voice gave me a glimmer of hope, but it was tempered by the lingering ache of betrayal. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. It would take time, effort, and patience. And even then, there were no guarantees. As the day wore on, we talked more, unpacking the feelings and decisions that had led us to this point. It was painful, but it felt necessary, like clearing out an infected wound to allow it to heal. For the first time in months, I felt like we were truly seeing each other, flaws and all. But as night fell, I still wasn't sure where we stood. Rebecca went to bed, leaving me alone in the living room again. I stared at the wedding photo on the wall, the same one I had looked at the night before, and wondered if the couple in that picture would have survived what we were facing now. Only time would tell. The days that followed were a blur of tense conversations, awkward silences, and moments of reflection that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Rebecca had kept her word, answering every question I asked with honesty, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. But even her openness couldn't erase the wounds her actions had inflicted. One evening, about a week after the confrontation at the circle, we sat down together in the living room. The air between us was heavy with unspoken tension, but I knew it was time to address the question that had been hanging over us. What happens next? "I've been thinking," Rebecca began, her voice trembling slightly, "about us, about everything." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I know I've broken your trust," she said, "and I know I can't undo what I've done. But I need to know, do you think we can move forward? Do you think we can rebuild?" Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. I had spent so much time replaying everything in my head, the lies, the secrets, the betrayal, that I hadn't allowed myself to fully consider what I wanted. Did I want to try and save our marriage, or was it already too far gone? "I don't know," I said finally, my voice heavy with emotion. "Part of me wants to believe we can fix this, that we can come out of this stronger. But another part of me feels like things will never be the same." Rebecca nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I understand," she said softly, "and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I want to fight for us, Adam." Her sincerity was clear, but the weight of her words only deepened my internal conflict. Could I forgive her? Could I trust her again? And even if I could, would our relationship ever truly recover? We decided to give ourselves a month of counseling, honest communication, and space to figure out what we both wanted. It was a small step, but it felt like the right one. Neither of us wanted to make a decision in the heat of the moment, and this gave us a chance to see if there was anything left worth saving. The counseling sessions were raw and emotional. We unpacked years of unspoken feelings and unmet expectations, delving into the deeper issues that had led us to this point. I learned things about Rebecca I hadn't known before. Her fears, her insecurities, her struggles with identity and self-worth. And she learned about mine, my tendency to bury emotions, to avoid conflict rather than face it head on. There were moments of hope where I felt like we were finally breaking through the walls that had built up between us. But there were also moments of doubt, where the pain of her betrayal resurfaced, and I questioned whether I could truly move past it. The end of the month came faster than I expected. On the final day, we sat across from each other at the dining table, the same spot where our confrontation had begun. The air between us was thick with anticipation and dread. "So," I said, my voice steady but quiet, "what do we do now?" Rebecca took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I want to keep fighting," she said. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've hurt you, but I believe in us, Adam. I believe we can get through this if you're willing to try." Her words were earnest, but they didn't make the decision any easier. I stared at the table, my thoughts swirling as I tried to make sense of everything I was feeling. Then finally I looked up at her. "I want to believe in us too," I said, "but I need you to understand something. If we're going to try again, it has to be all or nothing. No more lies, no more secrets. I need to know that I can trust you completely." "You can," she said, her voice breaking. "I swear, Adam, I'll never hide anything from you again." Her tears were genuine, her desperation palpable, and in that moment I made my decision. "Okay," I said, my voice firm. "Let's try." The relief on her face was immediate, but I held up a hand to stop her. "But it's not going to be easy," I warned. "We have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take time. I can't promise things will ever go back to the way they were, but I'm willing to try if you are." "I am," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes." The days that followed weren't magical. There was no instant healing, no dramatic moment of reconciliation that erased the pain. But there were small steps, shared meals, honest conversations, moments of vulnerability that gave me hope. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. And while I didn't know what the future held, I was willing to take the risk. Because sometimes love isn't about perfection. It's about the willingness to rebuild, even when the foundation seems beyond repair.